on the biological computation project in the Department of Psychology at the University of Alberta, and he's going to speak to us on Volition's patented procedure for producing PDP promoting PhDs, a personal parable. Sorry.
I'm the black sheep of the lab, which is why they don't have the bio. The title was going to be, you know, what did Zen do wrong with Mike? But it didn't have enough alliteration, so. Just going to start off. Really, the theme is how could a noted connectionist critic writing famous books like this churn out students who write books with titles like Connectionism, a Hands-On Approach. So that's...
Going to give us the answer?
Yeah, I think I am. Because I think at the end I'm going to say that you're a closet connectionist, actually.
You just going to sit there and take that?
So I'm from a small northern Ontario mining town. So at the end, I mean, you could just blame that, okay? And I went to the University of Western Ontario the 1970s because it was the furthest away from Timmins, Ontario, the furthest place that accepted me. I was going to become a famous biochemist, but I wound up becoming, I guess, less than famous psychologist. I got interested in psychology my first year. I got really taken with cognitive psychology my second year. I took an undergrad course with Albert Katz, who was my honors and master's supervisor. And Joe Schlehammer. Joe Schlehammer was the TA for that course. And yeah, Joe wound up, we were together in Zen's lab the latter years of my PhD there. But Joe, recognizing that I was really interested in this cognitive stuff, said, you gotta take a course from this guy, which I couldn't do in my third year because he was away on sabbatical. So in my fourth year as an undergrad, I took a full-year course, Minds and Machines, amazing course. A half-year course, Human Information Processing. I don't remember so much about that course. But the Minds and Machines course was amazing. So you might think it was, yeah, just him lecturing like this about minds and machines. By the time I took this course, I was really steeped in, you know, the empirical literature in cognitive psychology. And all of a sudden, I take this course, and it's more like this for me. And I like this picture for two reasons. One, it was definitely a blue pill, red pill situation. And second, the mirrored glasses, because early on in that course, I remember quite distinctly Zen going, why do mirrors reflect left and right and not up and down? And I'm going, So at any rate, I took the red pill. So did Richard McLennan. I remember Richard, who's now, I believe, chair of psychology at University of Regina. The reason I remember Richard is because that class started off with, I don't know, 15, 20 students. And by Christmas time, there was only 4 of us, and Richard was the only other psychology student, right? So there was a lot of taking the blue pill, maybe after the mirror lecture. We did amazing things for me. I did protocol analysis and programming of Towers of Hanoi. I learned a logo. It's my first, actually, my first programming language, which is a little scary, kind of thing. So we move on into the 1980s. I do my master's with Albert, and I wind up taking the plunge, for me a natural choice, to do my PhD with Zen. And one of the themes of the talk is the pollution environment, which is incredible. Great lab people, people he brings in, all of this stuff to read. This is part of my personal collection now. It's not his. I think there's a few things here that maybe weren't available, at least not to the graduate students. I don't know whether.
Yeah, library stickers on
I'm not saying where I get my books. Okay, I'm just not saying.
Was that just my pencil a lot?
At any rate, the environment was amazing, but I don't want to say that it was stress-free. Every now and again, you'd have to go into his office and say, this is what I'm doing on my thesis, this is where I'm going, what do you think? And he'd be seated behind his desk, and you'd be talking to him, right? This is a pretty stressful environment. And he would start to turn a chair away, and gaze out the window. I mean, every time. And I'm going, yeah, oh boy. It was a little stronger than that, actually, but definitely going, oh my. And then, of course, what would happen is he would turn back, and you're thinking, he's not even listening to me, right? And of course, he's listening to you, but with only, the 0.01% of his amazing brain that he needs to, as far as the thesis is concerned. And he asks the most penetrating, where he says, Mike, what you really need to do next is X. And of course, it was, obviously the thing that needed to be done, right? But Zen, just for you, just for you, I use my contacts. I still have some at Western, and they took a photo out of your old office window. Clearly more interesting than my thesis. Anyway, that's from a few weeks ago. Yeah. Well, one of the stories was he was checking to make sure his car was open. Part of the environment for me, because I started in, would have been 81. This is the time that he's working on this book. So this was an amazing experience. This is my personal copy. The libraries. And you can see it's a bit beat up. And it's been read carefully twice. The first time is with pencil, the second time with ink. Maybe the fact that I only read it carefully twice explains what happened. Maybe I should have read it 3 times. One of the threads going through what happened to me is going to be how marked up other books are compared to this one. Another important book at that time was Mars' book on vision. We spent a lot of time actually on both of these books in the lab environment. And I got really interested in computational vision. I said, this is looking a little more beat up than computation cognition. And at any rate, I wound up doing thesis work on motion correspondence problem. And I think it's important to point out the influence of Mark in the sense that for most of the computational vision algorithms, the most natural way to implement them is with a connectionist network. So it's a pretty slippery slope from there. And in fact, the lower paper there, which came out after I was at University of Alberta, is a connectionist version of the theory that I developed under Zenon's supervision. So maybe that paper, which I think came out in '91, is the real breaking point.
Actually, that wasn't that bad. It was not.
Well, it did come out in Psych Review, so I thought it was at least a reasonable paper.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, I learned that later too. Of course, 1986, I get set out in the academic world. First job at York. This is my official portrait at York. I don't have the hair anymore, but I still do have the tie. Then I wind up at University of Alberta a year later, 1987. I've been there ever since. I started off in the Center for Advanced Study in Theoretical Psychology, which didn't last very long. I don't think they could afford the business cards with long names. Not long after I got to U of A, because of the kind of training I had, I was interacting not only with some of my psychology colleagues, but also philosophy and linguistics colleagues. They got interested in reading different things. The hot thing at the time was the 2-volume PDP set. There was this weekly reading group in the summer. We started going through it. The reading group didn't last long. I think we got to chapter 4. So we missed the really interesting stuff that starts around chapter 8. I got really intrigued. At the time I was thinking critically about connectionism. And I thought I should learn a bit more about connectionism so I could be a proper critic. So I started doing even more reading. For instance, Minsky and Pappert's Perceptrons. You can see not only has this been read twice, seriously, but it's really ripped up. You know, so clearly I'm putting more time into the wrong books, right? I think that might explain me. The thing is, as I learn about connectionism, I start doing connectionism. I start discovering connectionist stuff. In particular, I developed a new architecture with a variation of the generalized delta rule. And it turned out that this particular architecture had lots of interesting properties, several of which we didn't realize we had until a few years later, actually. And that's really started it, right? I really was into doing a lot of artificial neural network research, which I'm still doing today. What I do, which I'm not going to talk much about, I'll tell you why in a second. I interpret their internal structure. The general story that I have is connectionism can't contribute to cognitive science unless you can understand how the networks are doing what they do. I don't want to get into that because I'm recalling one of the few telephone conversations I had with Zeno when I was in my office. And he's, you know, on the phone. So what are we up to these days? And I say, well, you know, I'm training these PDP networks. And then I interpret their internal structure to figure out what they do. And he says to me, well, that sounds like exactly the kind of work that nobody needs to be doing. So I don't want to get into too many details about what I do. So I think the first major thing that I did that sort of integrates my graduate training with this growing interest and expertise in connectionism is this Understanding Cognitive Science book. It's organized along levels of analysis, computational, algorithmic, implementational. But it makes an argument using those levels that classical models and connectionist models are not quite as different as some people might believe from reading, I don't know, some articles that some people might have written in 1988 and published in Cognition. So, and then I just kept on going. We actually discovered some very interesting properties for interpreting these networks that we'd invented. I wound up writing some of that stuff in a couple more books. The most important picture here, of course, is the apple and the tree. We know the apple must be me, the tree must be Zen, and I believe it's a very steep slope there. The apple is very dangerously close to just spinning away.
Is that a worm in the apple?
It could very well be. It could very well be. It was funny. It was funny because it was a serpent that gave it to me as well. So with this, with the training environment, obviously, right? I mean, we're all taught, as we've heard already from several people today, taught to read, we're taught to think. So clearly, I mean, Edmonton is kind of in the middle of nowhere anyways, right? So you have to read in order to try to figure stuff out. And so I start reading different stuff yet again. The most important, I think, for me is the Bradenburg's Vehicles book. I started thinking about the synthetic approach, which Roy was talking about. And I was in particular thinking about the synthetic approach as it applies to connectionism, which is one of the themes in the Minds and Machines book. But I also got interested in teaching synthetic psychology using Lego robots, so I rolled that into my own undergraduate curriculum. I called that course, I shouldn't say what course I called Minds and Machines, but I did call one of my courses Minds and Machines in homage to mine. And this resulted in apparently a crazy Californian idea. You know, just like connectionism, and maybe the problem is that I've got Californian ancestors or something, right? I've got another book on embodied cognitive science that introduces embodied cognitive science and also introduces studying it with Lego robots. A really dangerous foray into neo-behaviorism, possibly. I mean, behavior-based robots is not that far away from it.
Yeah, but Lego is good.
Lego is good. Lego is good. Trouble is, I keep on reading. You know, you should have given me other books to read when I left. You might take these books, you're going to need them. Anyway, Gibson, which I didn't read until fairly recently, just a few years ago. Nicer, and I'm going to tell a story about Nicer. You can see that it's terribly mangled. The coffee stand, so I was clearly really working that book, right? You can see possibly that some of the comments are done in red. Why is that? Why am I using red ink? Well, I'm getting interested in embodied cognitive science. I'm doing a lot of reading. And I know I need to read this book. And I'm down actually in my home library of books, and I see it on the bookshelf. I said, oh, I already got it. So I said, this is great, because I was going to buy it. And then I pull it off and I open it up, and it's all marked up in pencil. I said, oh my goodness. Not only do I own it, I've actually read it. And then I'm thinking, when did I read this book? And it was as a part of the comprehensive exams in the psych department at Western. But the whole theme of reading that book at that time was that all Neisser's arguing for ecological validity of experimentation, right? It had nothing to do with, embodiment, et cetera, et cetera. And so all of the pencil comments that I put in are all in the uninteresting paragraphs, right? So I had to use the red ink to separate the old mistakes from the new insights, right? So, and with that reading, my most recent book, it's an intro cognitive science book. I talk about classical, connectionist, and embodied. So the first half of it tries to introduce students to these three different approaches, and the second half of it tries to look at similarities or differences between them. I think one of the themes of my own work is more of an attempt to synthesize, at least in terms of the ideas. But in, doing the prep work and writing this book, it's made me think back to my PhD days, which were a long time ago, 30 years ago. I'm interested in thinking about MAR again. Not so much in terms of levels, although that's always been an interesting idea for me, but there's a lot of ways that you can interpret MAR, I think, from an embodied perspective, which I find quite interesting. And then there's this other book. See, I've never done any visual cognition experiments. I got to say, I don't know if that makes me like the only student not to have, but I can proudly say that I was one of the pilot studies in the Pollution Storm experiments with the eye tracking device that I believe was some torture instrument.
Yes.
But I never really, sorry to all those people talking about it today, it never really caught my interest. I never understood why it was so key. So I read this book carefully, only once. Maybe I should read it again. I'm not saying I'm not going to. And maybe because I've had, 30 years of being in the business and still trying to learn, it all made sense to me. I understood. I was actually awestruck by the scope of the book. But that doesn't mean that I can't interpret it in my own unique, synthetic way. Chapter 7 or 8 of Mind, Body, World makes an argument that maybe the fifth pollution that we're celebrating today is the synthesizer himself, that the theory in the picture in the blue, we've all seen this picture in different incarnations, right? I argue that this theory, it's classical. It's got that cognitive representation thing in it, right? It's embodied. It's got those links out to the world. And of course, how do you track those links? Well, you need to solve the motion correspondence problem with a connectionist network. So I make that kind of argument. And just to support it, I just want to point out that this is one open page. You can't see it very well. This is the Lindsay and Norman drawing of Selfridge's pandemonium machine, which was 56. The drawing is 72. One of the early connectionist models. So I find it intriguing that it got an image in Zen's book. I'll say no more about that. So, how did this happen? Right? We just get back to the thing. How did it? I don't really know. this is what I think his procedure as a mentor was. He gives you this incredible environment. I mean, it was amazing. And it's like, if you have half a brain, you take advantage of it, right? So what do? You read, you think, you do. And then you write about it in all collaboration with all of the other amazing people that are there. Trouble with this algorithm is that the environment's not really very accurately specified. And the thing is, so I've tried to duplicate this procedure in my own lab, but the trouble is that I have my environment with my books, my training, etc. And as a result, we get all kinds of things a little different from the 7th floor. Well, how can you do connectionism without an espresso machine? I mean, I'm sorry. That's mandatory. There's probably all kinds of connectionist stuff on that blackboard. I have a nice, friendly lab dog to, keep you company. This is my Nobody Loves Me, Charlie Chaplin poster. I think I put that up after that one phone call. I'm not sure. And these are the PhD students that have been churned out of that environment. So the good news, I would say, is this is just a small sample of the Pollution legacy. But I have to apologize, Zenon, because I believe all but one of them have massive connectionist segments in their dissertation. I'm sorry.
It's gone over to the dark side.
Yeah, the dark side indeed. And that is that.
You're a business network for solving the correspondence problem.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea.
yeah, I know you do. But then you also think it's not cognitive.
Well, no, if you just forget about the learning aspect of it,
Yeah,
the weights,
yeah,
I think it's a good model of it.
yeah.
Correspondence.
I'll answer the question.
Comment. Many years ago, a group of us at the University of Pennsylvania read research connections with the column.
Right. The blue one? Oh, okay, it doesn't matter.
Many years ago.
Right,
And this was a very interdisciplinary group,
right.
including Arvind Joshi, who asked what may motivate the choice of association
Yeah,
of that particular engineering group.
right.
And it was, he pointed out, you didn't have to do it that way.
Yeah.
And I guess that leads me to ask, are you doing that? Or
Well,
are you doing, putting,
that way.
yeah, are you
Well-
working with a fundamental association, or are you actually sneaking in all kinds of structural constraints?
no, I think I'm doing association, but can I simply say this? I might be sneaking other stuff in. One of the advantages of network interpretation is, see, the trouble is with the PDP stuff from the 80s and 90s, I call it gee whiz connectionism. Because, oh, gee whiz, we've got a connectionist network that does classical thing X, therefore we've got an alternative. But in order to defend that claim, you have to actually know how the network is working. And no one, hardly anyone, looks inside. When you look inside networks, you find all kinds of formal structures that are very easy to fold into a classical approach, which is why I view my stuff as being more of synthesis. My stuff right now, I'm doing a lot of music, and I'm finding new formal music theories inside my network.
Oh, yeah.
So,